So, if you guys all remember, last Wednesday we talked about Zahavi and handicaps and the expression of waste and being able to afford waste. So, this goes into a little more detail about his thinking. So, the big problem is always reliable signals. That means honest signals. They can't be cheated on. It's an ESS, actually. Now, originally, even before Zahavi, this pertained mainly to mating, and those individuals that could afford, let's say, the bright plumes, the cost to make them, the increased cost of predation, all that other stuff, those were handicaps that couldn't be invaded. You could either afford them or not, but obviously to varying degrees. Okay. But then Zahavi extended that to what? Anybody remember? Besides mating strategies and all that? Don't remember?
Is it exaggerated?
They're exaggerated, but what kind of other social interactions? What do the babblers do? The babbler birds?
They interfere with other operation.
Yeah, so it looked like it was altruism, right?
But it was selfishness.
But it wasn't. It was actually status. So the highest, yeah?
It's still debating whether it's altruism or not.
Well, that's what I mean. It's apparent altruism, but according to him, it's not. In fact, it's individual selection, and the advantage goes to the individual.
But most scientists don't believe that, right?
No, that's very well documented.
Okay.
We'll get into altruism a little bit later, and whether there's any such thing as altruism. Okay, so then, and there's a corresponding idea with humans giving gifts. Thanks. I told you about the potlatch culture up in the Pacific Northwest, where the richest individual gives the most expensive gifts to the poorest individuals. It doesn't make them richer, it makes him higher status. He can afford to be wasteful with his goods because he's got so many of them. He's so good that he can acquire all those goods. Now, unfortunately, that strategy is invadable. If you think about Paris Hilton. No, maybe you don't think about Paris Hilton. No. Does her wealth show that she's, well, it shows that she's high status, but is she really, is that an honest signal of her quality? Yeah, but she's so cute. Never mind. Yeah, I know. Yeah, there's an example of like a badge, right? And it's a false badge, and we all say, oh my God, what a loser. Okay, yeah.
When you say quality, like what is that? Like, is that country, fitness? What is that?
Yeah, fitness. In other words, a high quality male is one that can afford the cost of, let's say, the handicap. It's an honest signal. And so that's what that is, right? Now, with Paris Hilton, she disinherited status, she's probably gonna, obviously she enjoys the fruits of that, but in terms of quality, whether it's genetic quality or, let's say, I'll give you an example, ecological quality. So, in a pride of lions that there's always a dynamic going on between, there's usually 2 or 3 males, sometimes they're brothers, sometimes they're not, and they hold the pride. And then other males come in and try to displace them. And pride holders, they usually have tenure of about, maybe 4 years, something like that. But the ability to defend a pride, you would think, well, they're high quality males, right? And they're high quality because, let's say, they have better genes than the others. However, a pride holding males always have an advantage, even if by chance they're not high quality. By chance, let's say they manage to displace another pride, and you have these 2 males, and let's say one of them's not high quality, the other one is, but they both get fed in a pride much better than individuals who are not in a pride. I mean, they don't even go on the hunts. They just go and hang out with the females, have lots of sex. When they come into estrus, eat lots of food and sleep until, it's time to fight. Okay. So, in terms of handicaps, you can apply, or signals, these are all signals that we're really talking about. Zahavi really extended the idea of the handicap to signals to other individuals in a social unit, or even between, let's say, solitary individuals in terms of, who's boss and who's not. Okay. So, an unreliable signal in terms of giving information to others around them is one where there's no cost to the signaler. There has to be a cost to make it so that only some individuals can afford the cost, and then it's an honest signal. So, now in humans we cheat all the time, if you think about it. I go out and I rent a Ferrari, and it's the old gold digger syndrome. I run around in that. I look like I'm rich, and Nicole Smith goes for it again, right? She's not very attractive either, but be that as it may, for an old geezer like me, it's okay. So, likewise, lower status females, they can wear kind of fake jewelry and maybe get, maybe it fools a few other males, not necessarily low quality males, but somewhat high quality. So, there's all this stuff going on, but there's also truth detectors that we all have, looking out for interlopers. Stephen Colbert's Truthiness Index. Okay. So an honest signal, it's an ESS because only those who can afford the cost can pay it. And then the receiver gets real reliable information about it. And that cost can be like the spider drumming. It's a signal to the female that, hey, I'm a top quality spider. And anyone who isn't there, who died, let's say, because the drumming took their life before they had a chance to mate, they're gone. And the ones who are there who are low quality, they just can't drum very well. Okay. Okay. So, this is this idea about, instead of just signals that, let's say, a bird might have, or a fish, or whatever it is, humans have that gives them status. So, in this case, we've got a silver spoon that's hand wrought, and let's say it's got a certain value. Here it's like $10 or $20. But it's no better than actually using a spoon that's made of aluminum. So why would you have it? Well, it's a less effective contrivance, but it's considered beautiful. Even though it may not be, but it is considered beautiful because it's more expensive. Silver by itself, or let's say it was gold, is not intrinsically worth anything. We've imbued it with worth. It looks like time immemorial, humans have been drawn to gold, almost every culture, and those that have it, they have higher wealth. Even though gold doesn't actually give them anything, per se. Okay. So, the spoon itself, even if it was well wrought, but wasn't, let's say, gold or silver, it wouldn't be valued highly. You're actually, the value that an individual is actually paying, they're wasting their money on something that doesn't really help them all that much in terms of the way you use the spoon. Obviously, there's some tools that, yeah.
You know, the reason they use gold spoons is for professional tasters. So gold has no taste, while other metals do.
Shit.
So, like, yeah. You know, people that, like, taste wine, they can tell, like, the year it was made and, like, where it was made at. Those
Yeah,
are the
so
type of people-
what? You're undercutting me here?
I'm just-
Is that what you're doing?
just saying.
That's
Like,
right.
one of the
She's
reasons-
right. Marissa's right. He's undercutting me. Chester? That's true, but for the most part, gold is by itself not going to get you, well, it'll get you much, only because everybody agrees that it's beautiful and it's worth a lot, but not because it actually can do certain things that others can't. It's not like titanium or something, which is a rare metal, and it's actually very useful. It's lighter weight, stronger, all that stuff. So, if it says if only the lighter weight, let's say, of a hand wrought spoon that was made of aluminum compared to a heavy metal like silver betrayed whether it was an imitation or not, well, you'd be able to tell, but that's not necessarily the case. Or a rhinestone, something like that. So these are the things that we've made expensive, but not because they're intrinsically more useful than another. Okay, so now this is all economic theory, but this is really what the game of evolution is all about. It's economic theory. Who has the goods and who doesn't? And in fact, a lot of ecological models are stolen directly from economic theory and vice versa. Okay. So if the expenditure in question is no more or less legitimate than any other expenditure in terms of usefulness, this is an example of what you would call waste. Why would you waste all that money on a diamond ring when a cubic zirconium would do just as well? Now, maybe your mate would not think that. They would probably think you're a low quality asshole, and forget it. Okay, so, but here it's waste. I'm spending more than actually something is worth. And doesn't, by itself, make it more useful or enhance your life.
But like with diamonds and gold, like you can make money off of it. So
Why?
how is that a waste?
Because other people think it's valuable.
Yeah,
Right.
but it's not intrinsically valuable. Gold is no more, it's just another metal. It's just another element. Now there's some elements that are actually more useful than others for certain things. People use aluminum because it's lighter weight compared to steel. Okay? But let's say in this case, the only value is the value that others around you put in it. And it has nothing to do with its actual usefulness. Okay? So, and waste, of course, is like lower. When we use waste, we're kind of lowering the value of something. Like the dog who's eaten, and there's still food there, and let's say he pees on the food or something like that. Doesn't need it anymore, doesn't want anybody else to have it. Okay. So, in this case, waste would seem like a waste. But it's only turns out that because people have agreed on what it's actually worth, only some individuals can actually afford the waste. To toss it out like tossing out $100 bills. You know, I mean, it doesn't bother me because I'm worth billions of dollars, and $100 bills, it's like pennies. Okay. Does everybody understand that? So a lot of what people do, and other animals do, like that little bird, was they're saying now it's true that food is actually valuable. So he thinks the high status male who's feeding a lower status individual, he's actually giving up something that's useful, but he's treating it as waste. Like, I can afford to give it up because I've got so much. The actual value to him is much lower than the value to me. Okay. So, here we are with signal theory again. Males must vary in a way that matters to females in terms of being successful at reproducing. And the thing that females pick up on may be invisible to them. They don't know they have it, but it turns out, you know, it's like you walk along, he's got it. What can you say? Can't cheat that. He's got it. Okay. What? That's right. He's got it. Okay. Males must express an observable trait which actually depends on quality. In other words, it is a reliable signal that actually shows intrinsic quality in terms of the male. Now, it can be cheated on in a sense, like with the lions. Suddenly they're in a pride, they're getting fed better than lions that aren't. They're going to be in good condition, even though they might be lower quality. So in other words, their condition actually is pretty high. Their quality is very high, but their genes aren't necessarily any higher. In this case, the female can draw an inference about an invisible trait. In other words, she looks at him or she looks at her and she says, they've got it. The female strategy is a function that says how the quality actually depends on the observed trait. In other words, is there a real honest correlation between the observed trait and, let's say, genetic quality? So let's say in a bird with a long tail, we can say a longer tail is more costly because aerodynamically it puts a greater strain on the bird. Having a longer tail doesn't make you fly better, it makes you fly worse. But the female looks at that tail and gets all quivery because he's got such a long tail. And only this male can afford it because another male with a long tail was low quality and he's already been dinner for someone for a long time. Okay, so there's this differential cost assumption. In other words, a ratio of the marginal cost of advertising to the marginal advantage of improved assessment must be an increasing function of quality. As quality goes up, well, the advertising goes up, but the actual advantage goes way up. So, a male who has a shorter tail, whatever his quality, that's the red one. In other words, his quality doesn't really reflect anything about the tail, or the tail doesn't reflect anything about the quality. The female isn't going to pay attention to that. The blue, a male who has a longer tail if he turns out to have high quality. In other words, he can only support a high quality tail if he's high quality. Now, a male who has a shorter tail, when he actually turns out to have higher quality, in this graph, he's actually underselling himself. He needs to go out and get an advertising firm or go to a psychologist and build up his self-esteem. And then at the very top, a male who has a long tail, whatever his quality. In other words, he's high quality, but the tail really doesn't do anything for him. And then here's the female side. A female who views all males as average quality. Where is that? There. That's average. A female who interprets a longer tail to mean higher quality, just like the male. A female interprets a shorter tail to mean higher quality. And a female who views all males as high quality. She's not very discerning. So, in terms of mathematics, can we find such a strategy that if the population is playing all those strategies, in other words, a tail doesn't show any quality for the male or the female, for two of those, and then a long tail is in fact a better strategy, and a lower quality tail but high quality individual is kind of like a losing strategy. Okay, so this is just breaking this down. Now, a high quality male could gain by breaking the rule and having a shorter tail and not having to pay the cost. The tail would cost less and the females would rate him just the same, and therefore there's no equilibrium. Okay, here's the same question. Is there a strategy in here that's actually an ES? And here's the same thing with this. Low quality male, breaking the rule, having a shorter tail. Tail would cost less. Females would still rate him high, even though he's not. And again, there's no equilibrium. The longer the tail, the longer the quality, the increasing cost that you're paying, but there's really not a cost to be paid. In this case, a female would gain by deviating from the population strategy and estimating the quality of a male to decrease with tail length, as this is how the male is behaving. There's no equilibrium, but she is still going from a longer tail doesn't mean anything, a shorter tail is better. This is males can't gain because they have a minimum cost, tail length, and females are tending to tail length, and females aren't really looking at tail length, they're looking at something else. Whether he's got bee sting lips or something like that. And this is, the female is correctly inferring quality from tail length. So quality actually shows, and it shows as an increasing tail length. Now, only those individuals who are high quality can afford the tail, and it's an ESS. Because you can't cheat on this, you can't use another strategy that will cost you less and still get the benefit. Okay. This is the example of an index, a signal in which meaning is fundamentally tied to form. It's not that it costs more, it's just worth more. And individuals can perceive this as worth more. So, if Michael Jordan can dunk a basketball, others perceive this as more, and he gets all the benefits that accrue to that. Now, let's say in the old days when there wasn't basketball, hunter-gatherers, but in this case, he would be one of those hunters that brings in the most game. And there's still societies that are like that have shown that the group actually gets more calories by gathering than hunting, but they go out and hunt none less because of the status that individuals gain, males gain. So, there's also something called coordination games. Let's say you have a signal that's expensive to make, and the signal is actually not to a female. Who else might it be? in terms of telling some other entity out there that I'm high quality.
Other males, predators, right?
Yeah, right. So, if you can do something that's a reliable signal, like the push-ups in a lizard, it'll tell the snake, you know, don't waste your time. And it's actually helping the snake in a sense, because he's not going to waste energy that he doesn't need to waste. He'll waste it on Larry instead of some other lizard. So, these coordination games, the preference for the outcome, but there's an overriding interest. And now, another example, of course, is that female fruit flies have already mated. The sperm that's first in is the sperm that has the highest chance of actually fathering children. So it's actually better for the male to find a virgin, even if the virgin isn't as experienced as the other one. Okay. Oops. Now, there's also reciprocal interactions or repeated interactions. In other words, the old back scratch thing. I'll scratch my back, I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine. You both get something for it. It's a form of cooperation. And you can quickly find out who's reliable, because repeated interactions is actually telling you this individual I can rely on and is not going to cheat on the relationship where he gives less and gets more and I give more and get less. So in a sense, repeated interactions is an honest signal. In vampire bats, some nights a bat will not find a blood meal. The thing is, they need a blood meal to survive. If they don't get it, they get weaker and weaker, and then the next night, finding a blood meal goes down, and they're in a downward spiral. So, the idea is that what happens, other individuals in the roost are actually feeding the bat who didn't get the blood meal that night. Now, if the bat is not reliable, let's say he cheats, or he's low quality and he just can't get enough blood meals for himself, what are the bats going to do? They're going to ignore him. Just like when we enter into an interaction, there's something called a quid pro quo. That means you get something, I get something of equal value. I put a lot of money into your campaign, you get elected, and then basically I own you, and I tell you what legislation I want. Now, punishment. So these are mechanisms that are different from the handicap principle. Repeated interaction doesn't really tell you about intrinsic quality, but it does tell you that this individual is somewhat reliable. So, punishment of false signals. So lots of what seems like altruism in certain cases is actually there's a punishing mechanism in place. The babblers, a lower class individual who tries to feed a higher class individual, they hammer his ass. You can't do that. So, even if you have a status, the costs are unreliable, but if you can actually put punishment on it, you're actually saying, okay, I have a badge of status, I'm lower, but I'm getting higher benefits. Of course, the police force comes along and locks you up. That's actually a cost that's driving your fitness down. And then reputation. Now, it would seem like with a reputation, you could maybe cheat on that. I have a fine reputation, I hide my past, and I go on my merry way. But first of all, repeated interactions might expose it, and punishment might actually be a way to counter it. But who are you going to interact with? Someone that you have repeatedly interacted with who's been honest versus someone who's not. An honest signaler or a dishonest signaler, they can actually get by because they'll move from group to group and no one will find out in time. Occasionally they'll get run out of town tarred and feathered, but they get away with it. So reputation, we put a lot of stock in reputation and whether someone is honest and reliable, and we hope we can actually detect the ones who aren't. Let's stop here. Okay. Individuals who aren't in the fields section, I want to talk to you guys about